Good day. Friends, let us take a further walk along the path towards understanding what Torah has in store for us. People say that we're a product of our heredity and our environment. Heredity, who we are born from, our parents, our ancestors, and an environment, the society in which we live. Friends, I'd like to challenge especially the second part of that statement. A product of our environment? We certainly are. But do we remain a product of our environment, or do we do something with it? Let's learn together about our forefather, Avraham Avinu. Who was Avraham? How did he come to be the founding father, not only of the family, but of the nation, and of a nation that ultimately is going to take over in its teaching, in its example, the entire world? Who was Avraham? In which environment did he operate? Avraham, we are told, lived in an environment where paganism was rampant. Not only rampant, it was total. Let us project ourselves into a society that lives by principles that we are foreign to, but that were very, very relevant in those days in the way people were thinking. Maimonides, the Rambam, gives us an introduction into how paganism operated. The Rambam tells us, in the beginning, everyone knew that the world has a creator, that the creator is all-powerful, all good. And then man drifted. Why did he drift? Rambam doesn't go into the why, but we've learned that man found it overwhelming to have to live up to standards that were calling on him to stretch and grow all the time. So man developed for himself, or many of men, a philosophy which would allow them to believe in God, but give them the license to do what they wanted. And says the Rambam, they reasoned, in inverted commas, they reasoned like this. They said to themselves, look, you don't take your problems straight, your little problems straight to the CEO, the man in charge of the entire operation. You go through the ranks. So we too, spirituality we need, but we go through the ranks. So we'll worship the lower forces, and then perhaps, if it's a more serious problem, go up the rank to a higher force. And eventually, they reasoned it to such an extent that they became totally involved in looking at lower forces, recognizing certain spiritual aspects of these lower forces, and ultimately designing for themselves all sorts of forms of trying to extract benefits, spiritual benefits, out of these forces. And Hashem allowed them to do that, because it's the principle of freedom of choice, that when people choose to go a certain route, Hashem allows them to take that route. And slowly but surely, man drifted into a mindset that went away from God, albeit acknowledging God. And eventually they did what happens in large firms, where family businesses, where the old man of the business has already gone, as they say in Yiddish, over bottle, is a man who you can't exactly oust him out of the business, but at the same time, you don't want him involved in the daily running. So you give him an office well away from the running of the business, put a big brass plate on his door, and make sure that you invite him exactly once a year to some or other official function and have very little to do with consulting him on the day-to-day, or week-to-week, or month-to-month running of their business. And in exactly the same way, man slowly but surely was able, sadly, to forget about his Creator, other than specific few people who retained the knowledge and the memory and the service of Hashem despite all, and went out teaching people and trying to bring people back to reality, but to very little avail. And then came this personality, our forefather Avraham. Our Chachamim, our rabbis, teach us that he was at the age of 3 when he discovered Hashem, according to one statement in the Midrash. It's 3. So do you mean then that Avraham was like one of these precocious children who take a violin and go to the Carnegie Hall in front of thousands? He plays wonderful music. He was a precocious child? No. The meaning of the statement that Avraham was 3 years old is that when a truth is obvious, it doesn't take a profound intelligence to see it. It's something like the emperor. The emperor in his new clothes. A child can see through the bluff. It takes an adult to get confused. And Avraham recognized that the world in which we live cannot either be the product of the funny pagan ideas that were prevalent in his day and his age, or could it be something like nowadays people imagine, that the world simply evolved, whatever that word means, by itself. That idea was so outlandish that people in the olden times thought far better of that. But whichever way we take it, Avraham recognized that that was false. And Avraham said to himself, a world that shows design, a world that shows purpose, purposeful design, cannot but have a designer. And the Midrash says Avraham was like someone wandering in the wilderness, and discovers, to his amazement, a building, a mansion, a palace. And the lights are on. Somebody's living here. And he goes in, and he goes from one room to the next. The one room is empty, the next room is empty. And he says, of one thing I'm sure, there is somebody who lives here, and I'm going to find him. And in the same way, Avraham found a world that was so clearly purposeful that he had to find who is the one who made it, who is the one who runs it. And he heard from people different alternative explanations, and none of them satisfied. And he didn't rest till he found what he was looking for. Avraham took on the challenge. And he started to question and challenge the people around him. He started to ask questions and not be satisfied with superficial answers. He said, who made it? And the people said, we worship the sun god. Why the sun god? Because the sun is the strongest source of energy that it is obvious that one can see. He said, the sun god you worship? Yes, we worship the sun god, said the people. Said Avraham, and what about at night? Oh no, then the moon takes over, the moon god. Said Avraham, sun god by day, moon god by night. What does the sun god do at night? Does he go to sleep? Does he take a break? Does he smoke a cigarette? Does he need to take a break or relax? But if he does, then he's not a god. And he didn't get any answers, or any answers that made any kind of sense. And then he said, and what are these idols? No, they represent the energy of a certain god that was reflected in the stars, and they would give him a whole spiel. to explain how the lower forces run the world, and they have their understanding to deal with that. And this is how Avraham engaged people with their concept of idolatry. And he rejected totally that a piece of wood or stone has anything to do with the running of the world. So he came to his conclusions. When a person reaches conclusions, he may write them down, he may teach, he may preach. Avraham might have done that, but none of those things are sufficient. He acted. How did he act? Yes, he taught. Yes, he explained to people their error. But the famous story of Avraham. Avraham, his father Terach, had a supermarket of idols, big ones, small ones, fat ones, skinny ones, any kind, shape and size to suit your pocket and your religious belief. And Avraham, as a youngster, was asked by his father to take charge of the store while the father went to town, to the bank, or to sort out something. And there was Avraham sitting amongst all the idols. And a young, strapping man, in his 30s, comes in and he says, I need a strong idol to suit me. So he selects an idol that suits his pocket and his wishes. And Avraham says, excuse me, sir, how old are you? He says, I'm 30 years old. Said Avraham, you're 30 years old. And my father made this 2 weeks ago, and you're going to take an idol made 2 weeks ago and you're going to worship it. Avraham said it. The man heard it, had no answer. He walked off without buying the idol. Avraham waited, and an old man walks in and he selects something to suit his taste. And Avraham asks him the same question, how old are you? He says, I'm 70. He said, you're 70, and a couple of days ago my father made this idol you're going to worship. And again walked out. He didn't know what to say. And then a lady comes in with a bowl of rice, places it in front of one of the idols, and leaves the store. Avraham took a stick, and he went from one idol to the next and smashed one idol after another until the entire store was in chips and pieces, bar one. That one was the biggest looking idol with arms folded. He took a stick, put it in his arms, and waited for his father to return. He waited for his father to return and knew exactly what the reaction would be, and it was. As his father opens the store, his father nearly faints from shock. And he says, Avraham, what happened? He said, can't you see what happened? He said, what do you mean I can't see what happened? What happened? He said, there was a fight amongst the idols. Everybody who worships idols says, my idol is the greatest. And their idols were quarreling. Each one was saying they're the greatest. They had a fight, and there was a huge fight, and everybody got smashed except that one. He's the winner. Said the father of Avraham, are you mad? Can they talk? Can they speak? Can they think? Can they act? They are pieces of stone and wood. Oh, said Avraham, is that what they are? Then what are you doing selling idols? Father of Avraham didn't know what to answer. And he said, let me take you to the king. I'm sure he will have an answer. Sure enough, he takes him to the king, which was very dangerous because the king was the biggest idol in those days. The strongest, most powerful force was worshipped. And the king said, Avraham, why don't you bow down to the idols like everybody else? Said Avraham, idols are not forces, idols are empty dolls. Avraham, said the king, is that what you believe? I command you, in this country we worship idols, you have to bow down to an idol. Said Avraham, but you worship, you're fire worshippers. Water puts out the fire. Said the king, fine, then become a water worshipper. Yes, said Avraham, but the clouds carry the water. Well, said the king, if the clouds carry the water, be a cloud worshipper. No, said Avraham, The wind blows the clouds. He took him from one thing to the next. They're not absolute. Then you want to worship the wind? Worship the wind, but worship something. No, said Avraham. When man breathes, he takes in the wind, and he blows it out. He controls the wind. Oh, he said, you want to be a yogi. You want to worship man. So be a yogi, but worship something. No, said Avraham. Man is also not absolute. When the day arrives, the Malach HaMovis with the big scythe takes him out of the world. He doesn't control his own life. Enough of this talk, said the king. We worship the fire. If the God that you believe in is stronger than the fire, let him save you. I'm throwing you into a furnace. And this was the famous miracle of the furnace of Avraham, where Hashem saved the life of Avraham from the hands of this king. Similar to the miracle recorded in the book of Daniel. This we have in reliable Torah tradition, that was the end of the debate, and ultimately what caused the king to ask Avraham to leave the whole country, because there was nothing, he was indigestible, there was nothing he could do with it. What we see is a man who is living with a strength of his own mind and the strength of his own character to break out of the shackles of limitation that society has imposed on all its members, and the superficial view of what is right and what is wrong, and who to worship and how to do it. We see a compass that guides a man, and he's led by his compass. Not that he's not a product of society. Of course he is. In the beginning, Avraham was pretty much like everyone else. But Avraham doesn't allow himself to be swayed. He has one goal, and that is to find the truth and to find Hashem. And Avraham says to himself, as we have to say to ourselves in today's day and age, so what if everybody is doing it? So what if everybody is using a tool or tools that are causing harm? Yes, I'm referring to programs on one of the modern technological marvels that destroy families, destroy people from the inside by showing them pornography. The ability to say no, the ability to find the off switch. Someone once remarked and said, the off switch is the greatest invention of the 20th century. The ability to control what society has to offer and not to accept it blindly. Are we victims? Helpless in the face of what the modern world in its adolescent state is offering us? Or are we strong enough to turn around and say, I am a child of Avraham. What is right, but what is wrong, never mind if the entire world has to stand on its head, I go forward and do what I know to be right. Guided by Hashem's will, guided what I know, guided by teachers who are familiar with what it is that Hashem wants of man. Once we take this message to ourselves and learn it and apply it, then we can call ourselves true children of Avraham Avinu. Children who, in our day and age, our confused day and age of semi-paganism, of unlimited license to dress, to behave as anybody wants, without any sense of sensitivity, decency, and modesty, where anything goes, and we turn around and we say, no, I am a son of Avraham Avinu. And Avraham was a single person, and he turned the entire world around. Each one of us has the ability to turn around our own world, the world in which we operate. And who knows when there are sufficient people to do that, whether we will have truly a better world, the world that Avraham was trying to recreate. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.